Another day and another set of teasers that have been shown by another content creator. Of course, we'll be deep diving a little bit more into the spells and talking about the shadow pack system as a whole, because still there are people who are confused about the system, and I want to try to like hammer down on explain the system as best as I can so people can get a better idea of how the whole shadow pack system works, because it is a lot of hieroglyphics. Don't get me wrong. I see the memes, I see the messages, I see the pings and servers saying how like it's a confusing system, and I get it. And I'm gonna do my absolute best, even after it comes out in test realm and whatnot. I'm gonna do my best to even explain the system even more. But in this video, we're going to be talking about the life changes with the transformations, the creatures, as well as the shadow enhanced stuff for life school. Of course, we've already made previous videos talking about the other schools. I think we did death and we did bounce. So today's life. And then I believe we have some couple other schools the next day. So the original teasers were given to Blaze Lifehammer. I'll put the original video down in the description. Definitely watch the original video because these were teasers that were given to him. And I'm kind of just like bouncing upon the idea and continuing on the thought process of certain spells that he did talk about in that video. And just kind of give a little bit more information and whatnot. So definitely show the original creator some support, as well as pay attention. There will be more teasers in the next couple days. Of course, I do have my own set of teasers that will be on Sunday, so be on the lookout for Sunday. I don't know exactly what time I'm going to be uploading them. I haven't like figured that out yet, but it will be early on in the day, that is for sure. So be on the lookout, turn your notifications and whatnot. And yeah, so let's go over shadow packs on Life School and talk about some extra information and whatnot. So of course we do have the diagram that I did make, so we will showcase that in the video. And they did showcase, or Blaze Lifehammer did showcase the shadow transformation and the creatures shown on this image. Here you go, which is Shadow Seraph is the transformation that will be shown, which is 35% outgoing as well as 25% outgoing damage. So just remember, this is a transformation. You're getting these stat bonuses because you're transforming into this creature. It isn't an aura, so don't expect if someone attenuates you or whatnot, you lose this. If it had an aura icon, it would show as an aura. But this is a transformation. It's just like if you had Strike, where Strike would just give you stats for just being transformed. Literally verbatim the same system. And on top of that, you do get one life school pip, and then the shadow pact is having blades on yourself. So think of it as you're starting at 0%. Every time you miss a shadow pact requirement, you either lose 5% of your HP, but if you fulfill the requirement, you just remove one of your blades. So just remember that. And I know some people had questions, right? If I had an LE blade, Spirit blade, does it remove the whole thing because it's part of one spell? No, because it's individual charms. So if you had like a elemental blade on you and I use this, it's only going to take one blade per round, up to 3 rounds. But every time I miss it, I lose 5% of my max HP. So very straightforward system, and everything in the bottom shows how the system works as well. Then we have the Shadow Creature. Now, Shadow Creatures are going to be used to fuse with the regular Shadow spells that we originally had, and that will make the new Shadow Enhanced versions. But what the Shadow Creature does, it's called Dark Seraph. Now, this does 75 shadow damage, kind of like a natural attack in a way, and then it puts a 680 hot that lasts 4 rounds. Then the shadow pact is you have to have traps on yourself. So if you're fighting a mob or an enemy or a boss or whatnot, or even in PvP, and let's say that they're just trap stacking you, you can use the Dark Seraph to just do a natural attack, break a shield, get a healing over time, and then proceed to take away a trap 1 per round. Only 3 traps in total, technically, right? And then that will in turn remove those so you don't lose max HP. So it's good for certain niches, and it's, you know, hey, it's pretty good regardless. And just remember to read everything on the image that I made. It's kind of just like a straight up slideshow at this point, and it just shows everything you need to know about the system. The pack system is 3 rounds. You pay 1 specific hanging effect at the start of each turn, and it consumes it, so it's going to take it away. And then if you don't have the requirement for the pack, you do lose 5% of your max HP instead. The max amount of HP you can lose is minus 15% of your max HP, and then you will lose the pact at the end of the 3 turns, or if combat is completed, or if you decide to replace the pact. HP loss is not at the end of the round. You'll lose all that HP that you missed the pact on at the end of the 3 rounds. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the shadow pact system. So let's start off with the one of the spells that kind of just like sets the stone for the rest of the video, which is Hungry Caterpillar. Now, Hungry Caterpillar in game, why is that a tongue twister? Hungry Caterpillar in game, if we look at it wherever it is, honestly, I lose track of half these spells sometimes. Right here. The original tier 1 is doing 790 damage up to 910 life damage, and then it does an 800 absorb. Not really a fan of absorbs, I'm gonna be honest, and I'm hoping, we stop, like, stray away from absorbs a little bit. They're not as useful in my opinion. I know some people have tried to use them in challenge modes and whatnot, but realistically, V-plagues exist, tower shields exist, other things exist. I mean, we would have to have like really high potency absorbs, in my opinion, for me to actually be like, hey, I want to use this in a rematch, I want to use this in a challenge mode. But like, if we're just getting absorbs at like 200-300, I'm never gonna use them, just being honest. But the advanced combat version of Hungry Caterpillar, or the one that's allowed, I guess, in PvP and in raids, whatnot, is this version of Hungry Caterpillar, which is doing 390 life damage, and then proceeds to put 2 healing overtimes on you, and that is 1000. This lasts 4 rounds, so pretty strong heal for what it is, and you're doing some slight damage, but still has no use currently, in my opinion, in challenge builds and whatnot. So let's venture back into the still images that we made talking about shadow packs. So if you look in the top left, that is the current path of Hungry Caterpillar, I can't even say it, of the current one that exists in game. And then in the bottom left, it would showcase what it would look like if you had Hungry Caterpillar in your hand, as well as you did have the new Dark Seraph in your hand, which is the one that does the natural attack. You can combine that and it will start glowing, of course, to signify, hey, you can combine these together. So just remember that. And then you can see the new path. There's a new path that is shown in that image, as well as the shadow fusion. So in the new paths, you guys can see the new variation has no shads, of course. That's the system we're going on, and that's what we've been talking about the past couple of videos. So base tier 1 Hungry Caterpillar, the one that you get from Darkmoor, as in like Graveyard, when you fight Malister and whatnot, is going to do 270 life damage. And then it proceeds to give you that 800 absorb. So it's still going to keep that absorb, but the damage got like nuked, essentially. 270 life damage is kind of crazy. I mean, it is 5 pips. I mean, maybe that utility is really highly valued. But yeah, it went from doing 790 to 910 to all the way down to 270, which is a drastic nerf in that part, because I mean, hey, it did lose its shad. And then you have the other variation, which is allowed in PvP and advanced combat, whatnot, which is doing 340 life damage, I believe. I have to like zoom in real quick. 340 life damage, and then it can clear up to 4 traps on you. So if somebody's trap stacking you and a mob is like has a cheat where it just spams traps on you, you can clear those 4 traps and you will get a hot in return. Very interesting to see on that part. And then you have the shadow fusion variation, which is one you can pick between the other. So like, for example, which we'll talk about in a second, you can kind of just choose which one you want. But let's start off with the left one of the shadow fusion, which is doing 875 life damage, which is still I mean, it's similar to the original Hungry Caterpillar, don't get me wrong, but it's just a middle value instead of it being, well, it's kind of more like on the high end. But still, I'm going to treat it as its middle value. So there is that. And the absorb is still the same. It's an 800 absorb. I kind of wish that they slightly increased the absorb on that, I'll be honest. Just to kind of like differentiate them a little bit. But I mean, hey, yeah. And then the shadow pact is you have to have traps on yourself. So once per round, it will take away a trap on you. And if you do not have a trap on you, you will take away, or it will take away 5% of your max HP. So there's that. And then the advanced combat allowed variation of Hungry Caterpillar is doing 340 life damage. So literally verbatim, the same exact damage, but it is less than the original Caterpillar. So there is that. And then it puts 1100 healing overtime, 2 of them that last 4 rounds. And then the shadow pack is having traps on yourself. Now look, if we compare this to the original Hungry Caterpillar, it's doing less damage, but the heal is more potent. So you're losing 50 damage for basically 130 more healing. So take that as much as you want, but this is just only the start. I've already kind of looked at the other life spells, and dude, the amount of healing that life is getting is kind of insane. But there's that. So now let me explain how like this fusion stuff works, because you can kind of pick which one you want. So for example, if I selected on my spelemental system, saying, hey, I want my shadow fusion to be the right outcome, which is the 345 life damage spell with that big old healing, right? On my spelemental system, I would choose, oh, tier 2, right? And then let's say on my regular caterpillar, I chose tier 1, which is the one that gives me that absorb. Let's say I still pack that or whatnot, right? I can combine the left side of Caterpillar, which is the 270 life damage, which is a new one, and I can combine that with Dark Seraph, and it will create that outcome of the Shadow Fusion, which is the right variation, which is the one that gives 1100 hot. So you have a little bit more variety on which outcome you want, and then on top of that, you can pick your spelemental path as well. So whatever Caterpillar I fuse, or whatever caterpillar I fuse with Dark Seraph, it will always be that outcome of the fusion I've already pre-selected in my spell writing tab. So there is that. Kind of a straightforward system. I know not everyone's going to get it, but I'm trying my best to kind of like hammer down on the idea of this is how it works, and try my best to explain it more and more and kind of reinforce that idea as best as I can, of course. So there's that. That's the whole shadow pack system, as well as the new shadow fusions. If you guys have made it this far into the video, just wanted to remind you guys that 75% of you guys that watch me on a daily basis are not subscribed. So do me a huge favor and subscribe. We're on that grind to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. All right, now let's get back into the rest of the video. Now we can venture into all the spells that got changed, reimagined, whatnot. So let's start there. And the first spell we're going to venture into is Wings of Fate. Yes, Wings of Fate got changed. Of course, all the shadow spells, or shadow enhanced spells, got changed. But if we look at Wings of Fate currently in game, what it does is it's for example, it's a 75 hit, and then it puts a 720 damage over time, and then as well, it's a 75 heal on everybody, a burst heal, and then it puts a 680 heal over time. Honestly, the writing on this should be changed. I'll be honest, it should be changed. But yeah, that's what it was doing. It's an AoE hit and as well as an AoE heal. And then Path B, it's an 80 damage hit, and then it proceeds to put 2 bombs on the target that are 500 damage that last 4 rounds, and then it's a 20, or that was about to say 10-20 heal that's 2 separate hots that last 4 rounds. So Egyptian writing in its nutshell. But that's what it's currently doing in game, and it's slightly adjusted, and actually the writing is way better now, what they've shown. So currently, if we look at the new Wings of Fate that doesn't have a shad, of course, just remember this one does not have a shad. At max tier, it's still a 75 hit, as well as it's a 300 damage overtime on all targets, and then it's a 75 heal with a 300 healing overtime on all targets, I believe, unless that's changed. But judging by the writing, you really can't tell if, like, I mean, yeah, I know some people wanted to have the icon of like all allies, enemies, whatnot. But Wings of Fate has been always all allies, all enemies, so I'm just going to go with that assumption. So that's what it's doing. Is it usable? Is it going to be viable? Not really, man. Like, Wings of Fate is such a niche spell. It really is. And this top path is not going to be viable. Whether you're questing, whether you're trying to use this in some sort of fight, there's other spells that exist that are just better, in my opinion. And then if we look at Path B of Wings of Fate, 680 life bomb. Those are 2 separate bombs that last 5 rounds. So after 5 rounds, it will detonate and do the hit. So you're not going to get ticks every round. That's not how bombs work. It's not a damage over time. It's going to blow up after 5 rounds and do the hit. And then if you gambit, you can gambit up to 3 blades, and it will give you a 530 hot that lasts 5 rounds. So very interesting on that regard, because you are putting a bomb and you are healing it, and you can combine this technically. I know someone's going to say, well, I can use Wings of Fate and then use, for example, Phoebus Will. If you don't know what Phoebus Will does, which we'll quickly venture into back into the game, Phoebus Will is a really good spell, and I've honestly been kind of glad that they added something like this, and it's allowed in advanced combat as well. And you can use this in advanced combat strategies, which plenty of people have already, which is, it does damage 8 pips, yeah, but you can detonate 3 dots and it will do 130% of its value, which is it's pretty good, especially for fights that have equalize. And I mean, we haven't had an equalized fight. Soundopolis, do we have an equalized fight? I'm trying to even remember. No, we didn't have an equalized fight in Soundopolis, thankfully, at least on challenge modes. But Eventually I can see them bringing back more equalized fights, and usually dots, and whenever you detonate them, it kind of just does burst hits, so you can, you know, multitask in that sort of regard, and it kind of like helps evade equalize slightly. So that's what tends to happen, and that's what people do. So Wings of Fate can be used for that aspect, but still it is going to be a specific niche, because what people are going to start using is actually fire spells and use Phoebus Will to detonate them and do multiple hits. And that's just kind of what's going to go. But at least Wings of Fate has the opportunity to be able to do something like that. So there's that. That's what Wings of Fate looks like without the Shad. Now, if we venture into the Shad variation, so if you combine whatever Wings of Fate with Dark Seraph, depending on the path you choose as your outcome for your fusion, you will get one of these tiers, of course. So at max tier path A, what it's doing, it's a 75 hit and then an 855 life damage over time that lasts 3 rounds, which is a lot of writing in my opinion. And then on top of that, it's a 75 heal, and then, or like a burst heal, and then it's doing an 825 healing over time that lasts 3 rounds. So very interesting to see in that regard. I mean, hey, it's just a higher potency, damage over time, and heal, but still, I don't think we're really using Wings of Fate. And then of course the pact is you have to have blades on yourself, so it will take away a blade from you per round, up to 3 rounds of course. And if you do not have a blade, you will lose 5% of your max HP. You're starting off at 0%, and every time you fail you lose 5%. It's not like you're at 15 and you go down. You're starting off at 0 technically. So that's how that system works. Then we have path B, which I honestly like this path B, and I mean, I'm still going to say a statement. If, you know, Shad rating gets looked into, we can get semi-consistent Shads. This path B is good, and I'm not going to lie about that. That is a really good path B. But what it does, it's a 1100 bomb. That's 3 separate bombs that last 6 rounds. So after 6 rounds, all those bombs will detonate. And then this heal is insane. It's a 1920 heal. That's 2 separate hots that last 5 rounds. And then the Shadow Pact is you won't have to have blades on yourself. Now, this Wings of Fate, this path B, is quite interesting. And I'm not going to lie about that. It is actually quite interesting. Yes, there are other spells that do bombs and that can fulfill this thing. But for what this specific Wings of Fate is doing versus like the other bombs that currently exist in the game, it's putting 3 bombs, which is, you know, activating a conditional. And then you can also get a heal out of it. You can also use this to set up other spells that require 3 overtimes, like a Scion or whatnot. So, in my opinion, this Wings of Fate is good. Honestly, it is good. I don't know how it affects PvP as much. I mean, PvP players will be able to tell me on that one. But from advanced combat standpoint, viewpoint, yeah, I think this is good. Genuinely, I think this is a good spell, and that's all I really have to say about that. I have nothing harsh to say about this Wings of Fate. So there's that. Now let's venture into the next spell, which is Lamasu. Now Lamasu, as well as the other 4 pip hits, I've kind of said this already in previous videos. I think they should just be AoEs. I think they should just be 4 pip AoEs. Genuinely. And that would be kind of better, because like currently the 4 pip AoEs that we have, they're via event spell elements. So if you want to get those, you have to do event spell elements. It would be nice if the 4 pip Mirage stuff was AoE, so then we can farm those and use those. So if we don't want to use the 4 pip AoEs that we got and, you know, have to farm them from events, you can use this, and you can actually farm this via, you know, bosses and whatnot, and Mirage, and, you know, farm spell elements, which would be better. So I'm still going to stick with the statement that these should have been AoEs. But currently what it does is a 755 at max with the Shad pip. That's 4 pips, and this is divide. This is the old divide mechanic, not split target. Don't confuse it with split target. Split target's more forgiving, while divide is not. It's literally just halving it every time you select another target. So if I select 2 targets, so 50% of it's going to go to 1 target, the other one's going to go to 50. And then the more you split, the more it's going to do less. So if you eventually split it against 4 targets, you're doing 25% of the original damage to each target. Kind of crazy to think about how divides were like like, you know, they weren't as forgiving. So it's like the fact that they were around for so long is kind of crazy. And then path B, what it gave was it was doing 335 damage, and then it would give you a positive aura, so it would give you a 45% damage outgoing for life. So very good, honestly, for what it was. But the fact that this is not going to exist anymore kind of sucks. But to be fair, when's the last time I used Lamasu? Not really, because I'm not majority of the time I'm not really on my life, and most of the time it's been fire hitters, storm hitters in advanced combat, sometimes even myth hitters. So you don't really get to use this unless you are cosplaying. I know some people are using foliage and stuff like that, so some people were trying to use that just so that they can buff their foliage damage. But guys, it's a shad. Getting shads is not the easiest thing in the world in like a boss rematch and whatnot. You would have to rock so much shad pieces, like even triangle jewels, to even get a semi or like even a near semi consistent shad rating or shad pip gauge to fill up at a certain point. So there's that. So let's look at the new Lamasu without a shad pip, which is doing 360 damage with no utility, and now it's a select target, so it's no longer divide, it's now being a select target, so it's more forgiving. And yeah, 360. Like I said though, still think I'm gonna reinforce this idea of these should have been 4-pip AoEs. Genuinely should have been 4-pip AoEs. All the top hats should have been 4-pip AoEs. So that's what max tier is looking like. Then if you look at path B, it's doing 305 life damage, and then it clears the trap. In return, it gives you a 35% life blade. So per clear, you get a blade. So if there's 3 traps on you, of course, you'll get 3 35% life blades. Very good in my opinion. And life is going to reinforce that idea of, hey, we are trap countering. Which, I mean, they kind of already were, but this is just reinforcing more and more ideas that, hey, we're gonna make sure. We're gonna make sure. So I like this Lamasu for 4 pips. Doing that, it's good. It's like a mini centaur if you think about it, because centaur, what it currently does, without me switching screens or whatnot, centaur at path B, what it does, it's 6 pips. It does 540 damage, and it clears up to 5 traps. In return, you get 40% blades. So if you want to use 4 pips, you can do slightly less damage and only clear 3 traps. In return, you're getting 35 blades. Or if you want to waste another power pip to get 6 pips, essentially, you can use Centaur to clear 5, and in return, you're getting higher potency blades. So it's like a weaker version of Centaur, but the fact is you can pack Centaur and Lamasu at the same time. That's another thing to keep in mind. So there's Lamasu. Now we can talk about the Shadow Fusion versions of Lamasu. So if you combine that with Dark Seraph, any version of Lamasu, of course, whether it be Path A or Path B, you can get whatever outcome you selected on your spell rating. So if you selected Lamasu Tier 3 Path A, it's doing 860 life damage, and then the Shadow Pact is just having traps on yourself. So per round, it'll clear a trap that's on you. If not, you will lose 5% of your max HP. Just remember though, you're technically starting off at 0%. You're not at 15% and you're trying to decrease it. You're at 0, and every time you fail, you lose 5% of your max HP. So that's how it's upscaling in that sort of way. But that's Lamasu Path A. And then if you look at Path B, what it's doing now is doing 565 life damage, and then it proceeds to give you two life blades that are 55%, and then the Shadow Pact is just having traps on yourself. Now, I'll be honest, not too much of a fan of this. It's nothing like crazy. I mean, hey, it is 4 pips and a shad, right? We do have to remember that, and you still are clearing traps on yourself per round. Now, I'll be honest, I don't think you're going to use this bottom one. I really don't. I think the Lamasu that already exists, or the one that's shown, I guess, or I talked about earlier, the Path B is just better. You're not using a shad. It's doing 305. You know, you're clearing 3 traps and you're doing that much damage. But that Lamasu, if we're being honest, genuinely honest, if I go back to Centaur, right, and let's just compare it against Centaur, it's doing slightly more damage. Very slightly. It's doing 25 more damage than Centaur, and you do get 255 blades, and theoretically it's technically clearing 3 traps in total. If there is a trap on you and it removes it per round, you'll remove 3 traps. I still think Centaur is just better, and I still feel like the Lamasu that's just without the shad is better, because at least you don't have to run the risk of, you know, having a trap on you for 3 rounds straight, while you can just use Path B Lamasu, where you can just clear 3 traps instantly and you'll get 3 life blades that are 35%. So that's kind of just my argument. Not too much of a fan of this Lamasu in my opinion, but I guess it just reinforces the idea of, hey, we're a school that's going to be clearing traps. We're reinforcing that idea a lot. So that's my take. Lamasu shad variation, not much for me. But base Lamasu, Path B, it's good. It's just a lesser variation of Centaur, but if in reality you can pack Centaur and Lamasu at the same time, so that's something you do have to be wary about, which is interesting, you know? So let's move on to the next spell, which is Grenadier. Now, Grenadier has been in multiple fights as well, in certain boss fights and whatnot too. So I'm kind of intrigued of how this will affect some boss fights and certain, I guess, mobs, or I guess I don't even know if there's a mob. There's probably some mob that has as Grenadier. But anyways, this is the era where they had the 5 pip, 6 pip, and the 7 pip variations. So they're kind of just sticking with the idea of now we're just going to make this a 5 pip. But in game currently at 7 pips with a shad, it was doing 1k essentially, and then or up to 1.1k, and then it would put a pacify on yourself for 3 rounds. I wonder, so the pacify was interesting, don't get me wrong, especially against AI, because a lot of people are using, for example, like Megataunt, Pacify, whatnot, to manipulate mob AI. And Pacify didn't do it as great compared to Megataunt, because Megataunt kind of forced the idea of I'm here, like come fight me type of deal. And I'm wondering if the ice spell, for example, like Shatterhorn still has Megataunt. We'll have to see, but that kind of gives me an idea about that as well, because if you can use that, that's a hit in Megataunt. Yeah, but anyways, Grenadier being the fact that it's a pacify, so that's something you do have to remember. But it's doing that much for 7 pips and a shad. And then Path B, it was doing its 5 pips and a shad, and it would do 485 life damage and activate 2 hots. And it would activate those hots. So activating is kind of like detonating. So you know how like you detonate damage over times? Activate is that term, but for healing over times. So you don't detonate a hot, you activate it instead. And what it would do is it would activate the value for 15% more than what it was. So 115 technically, right? So it was good just to get extra healing out of your hots, you know, because it would work on 2 separate hots, right? It would work on 2 hots and you get 15% of its value. That one didn't really have as much use when it came to anything raid related, challenge related. No one was really using that just because we haven't needed to heal too much. There's only select challenge modes, and for example even select raids that where it's like, hey, we need a heal. Like for example void raid, the people still run a jade and to heal and whatnot, but people aren't gonna use Grenadier or whatnot. People are just gonna use like Pigsy and other stuff, right, to give that idea of, hey, I'll heal you and stuff. So that's like the difference. So now let's look at the new version of Grenadier, and yeah, you guys can see now it's just a static 5 pip spell. It's no longer doing that 567 increase. It is just a 5 pip spell now, and it's doing 345 life damage, but you still will have that pacify on you, and I believe it's still the same pacify. I think it's just 1 round less. Yeah, so instead of it being 3 rounds, it's now being 2 rounds, so 1 less round on the pacify, and the damage has fallen off significantly. Just remember though, this was originally 7 pip spell, and then on top of that it did have a shad, so you are losing some value from that, and you know the pacify has been decreased as well too. But I wonder what spell, you know, with all these spell changes, it does really make me think of, for example, like what spells mobs will have if they already had a Grenadier. Will they have the non-shad version, or will they have the shadow fusion variation? And this will probably shake up some fights. We'll have to find more information about that, because if bosses do have this pacify, it is kind of annoying. Because if you can't hit them round 1, I mean, yeah, you can still use AoEs to evade it, but if they start incorporating bosses of like, hey, you can't AoE in here, then you're gonna have to actually, okay, well, I have to kill the minions, and then I have to wait for this pacify to run out and whatnot, and do certain things. So that does kind of make me kind of shaky, and I guess, oh, I'm shaking in my boots type thing of what they're gonna do when it comes to like certain bosses and whatnot. Then we do have Path B Grenadier, which is doing 380 damage, and then you can gambit your blades up to 3 times, and it'll put a bomb on the target, and that bomb will do a 225 life bomb that lasts 4 rounds. In a way, I'm pretty sure this is a like toned down variation of, yeah, it's kind of like a toned down variation of Forest Lord, because Forest Lord you can gambit your blades and put bombs on the target, but this is doing initial damage, and then on top of that it's gambiting blades to put bombs. So it's still doing the gambiting thing like how Forest Lord is, but instead Grenadier is doing an actual hit first, and then it's gambiting blades to put bombs on the target. So interesting when it comes to that, and I'm kind of looking forward to that Grenadier as a whole as well. And then now we have the shadow, or I was about to say shadow pack variation. Well, yeah, it is a shadow pack variation, but the shadow fusion variation of Grenadier. So if you do combine Dark Seraph with whatever variation of Grenadier, you can get that top path if you did select it on your spell writing tab, which is doing 1100 life damage. And then it's a pacify that lasts 2 rounds. So we're still sticking with the idea and reinforcing that idea that it's still going to be 2-round pacify. So 3-round pacify on Grenadier is just completely gone now. And then the Shadow Pact is you have to have blades on yourself. So it will take a blade away from you per round. And whenever you do not have a blade, it will take away 5% of your max HP. You're starting off at 0% technically. Every time you fail that pact, you will lose 5% of your max HP. And then we do have the Path B variation, which kind of interesting as well. So at 5 pips with the shad and everything, it's doing 750 life damage, and then it proceeds to put 2 bombs on the target that last 5 rounds. They're doing 780 life damage, and the pact is having blades on yourself. There is some combos that you can do with this, and honestly, I'm all for this Grenadier. So I really do like some of these spells that life got are kind of interesting because you can do Grenadier, do some damage, whatnot, and you can blade it up. Right, let's just say you're using a bladed up Grenadier, right, and doing some solid damage, and then on top of that you're also buffing the bomb, and then you can have somebody that uses the new Apocalypse that is detonating these for even more value. So interesting combos you can do. Kind of looking forward to this new Grenadier, but still the idea comes into my mind, hoping shadow pips get looked into, man. I'm hoping that we can get a consistent shad game because there's so many of these shad spells that I'm looking forward to, and some of them I just can't, like, I don't really expect myself using because, like, how long is it gonna take me to get that shad, you know? We'll just have to see about that. But anyways, that is Grenadier. And now we can move on to the second, or basically the last spell, which is Lord of Jungle. Now, I know some people were concerned about Lord of Jungle, what they're going to do, because Lord of Jungle does get used at times whenever people quest and whatnot. I know some people have the 7-pip variation of Lord of Jungle and pack it, and on the off chance that they get a turn 1 Chad, what they're going to do is they'll use this to do some good damage. So currently in game at max tier, if we are using the 8-pip variation, because this was the era where they would do 6-pip, 7-pip, and 8-pip. So the 8-pip variation at max tier essentially was doing 915 life damage, which was an AoE, and then it would convert, okay, I didn't like the system, but converts 10% of your armor into a percentage of a life blade. Yes, so life was really trying to use its absorbs at an efficient rate, and the higher they absorb, and it would convert 10% of that absorb into a life blade. I don't like this, still don't like this. Just because I know we're trying to get this idea of armor absorbs, whatnot, I don't like it. Benefit. And then we do have the Path B variation, which is 535 life damage, and then it would give you a 45 life blade as well as a healing blade. So kind of like a Luminous Weaver, but just slightly stronger to a certain aspect. I mean, 535 with those, and if we compare that to the Luminous Weaver that currently exists in the game, is doing 410 with 20%. So it was really just a stronger Luminous Weaver, and it did require a shad, but nowadays people weren't really using it as much because people were just using their shads on, like, surge and whatnot, and actually using other spells. So that's like the difference between them. So that's the Lord of Jungle that currently exists in game. Now if we look at the new Lord of Jungle, and I'm sorry to say, Life Wizards, bro, but your Lord of Jungle is nuked. It is doing 390 life damage, and that's an AoE, and it's doing that convert thing again. Now I'll be honest, you're just not going to use that, and it's sad to say, because literally Xan the Bandit is just a better option. Xan the Bandit is doing 425, and it gives you a skill pip. Now, I know some people are like, well, I can, what if I still want to use it? I can use it for a set period of time. The thing is, you're not, because most of the time, like, how often are you gonna have 6 pips, right? I know someone's gonna say, well, what if I want a blade first, and like an LE or a spirit blade, and then I want to hit with Lord Jungle? By all means you can, but it's more effective to use just a 45 life blade, or even just frenzy, and then the following round just use Forest Lord. Forest Lord at max tier is 660 life damage to 720. You see where I'm getting at? So, in my opinion on this Lord of Jungle, I think they should remove the utility on it, and I don't think anyone would be upset about this. Maybe there might be a select few people that will be upset, but from my POV, I'd say remove that. Remove the convert 10% armor and to a blade. You just get rid of that. Just honestly get rid of that, and just make it so it's a solid 6-pip hit. That is my opinion on that. It's banned from advanced. You might as well make it somewhat solid, or even a slightly less tone. I was about to say tone. Slightly less toned down variation of Forest Lord, and people will be fine. Because then at least you can do, like, you know, if you want a Spirit Blade, you can Spirit Blade into it, and you still be okay. But there's just no value for, in my opinion, to do that right now, because you can just, you know, sharpen your fire, or your, I was gonna say fire, sharpen your life blade, and then just use the other spell, Forest Lord, right? That's just my opinion. But we do have the Path B variation, which is allowed in advanced combat and whatnot, which this is kind of semi-strong. Yeah, so it's doing 455 life damage. It is select target, so you can select multiple people. And then it proceeds to gambit up to 2 damage overtimes, and then it will give you a 60% life blade as well as a healing blade. Now, when I saw this spell, it is literally a better variation of Nature's Wrath to a certain extent. So Nature's Wrath is doing only 225 life damage, and you're gambling that damage over time to get 1 life blade that's a 65 as well as a healing blade. Now, if you want to spend technically double the pips, you can do slightly more damage. It's technically double the damage. Yeah, you're only doubling the damage, doubling the pip value, and it's doing less percentage on the blades. So instead of doing Nature's Wrath into the Nature's Wrath, what you can do is use Lord of the Jungle, and it'll just, you know, it'll be 6 pips, but you'll get those 2 blades that you can keep and save those for something else. So it's still very interesting, and, you know, I can see people, for example, hey, I want to use Fire Elf. Okay, cool. Use Fire Elf. Let's say the enemy has a shield. Now that person has 2 dots on them. Oh, now I'm gonna use Lord of Jungle and get those blades in return. I'll get 2 60 blades as well as 2 healing blades, and I did some okay damage. It is 6 pips though. That's something you do have to remember, but it's something that you can do in like a team fight strategy if you really wanted to. So just putting that out there when it comes to Lord Jungle. And then we do have the Shadow Enhanced variation, which is the Shadow Fusion, where you combine Dark Seraph with either path of Lord Jungle, and then you can, you know, choose which one you want on the spell writing tab of which fusion you want the outcome to be. If you look at tier 3 max path for path A, it is doing 1015 damage, which is quite strong. Now, for comparing this to the Lord of Jungle that currently exists in the game, the 8-pip variation is doing 915, while this is doing 1015. So, you know, losing a power pip, and it's still doing more damage than the original Lord of Jungle. And then on top of that, it's giving you 265 life blades. Very good, very good. Just still going to reinforce the idea of they need to look at shad pips, and I need to hear a detailed response if they're ever going to look at it, at least. But yeah, no, so like it does a really solid amount of damage for that part, and then you do get those blades. But the Shadow Pact is where it gets a little bit iffy. You need to have a damage over time on the enemy. Now look, in total you're gonna need 3 damage overtimes, and if you don't have a damage overtime, you're gonna lose 5% of your max HP. So you could technically have an elf, like elf into the Lord of Jungle, and then it will take away those 2 dots, but that last dot is still missing, so you're gonna have to lose 5% of your max HP. Of course, there's other combos you can do, but I'm just giving an example of what it would look like. So there's that with Lord of Jungle. The 65 blades are good though, basically, or even near Fate blades, and part of me wishes that why not just unban Fate, but I mean, now then we have Path B, which is interesting as well, which is doing 755 life damage, and then it gives you 3 55% life blades and healing blades. Yeah, that's 6 blades. You're getting 6 blades, 6 charms essentially from this. Yes, 3 of them are blades, 3 of them are healing blades, but you're getting 6 charms. And you do have to remember though, you do need dots on the enemy though, so you will need a damage overtime per round, so 3 damage overtimes. If not, you will lose 5% of your max HP per round. There is no damage overtime on the enemy, so there is some high risk, high reward for something like that, and it just really comes down to personal preference. Still though, 6 blades is kind of crazy, and if you wanted to, you can even Oni out of that. You can literally use that and then literally right afterwards, where's the primal, where's the primal Oni at? Right here. You can primal Oni out of it. Which is, I mean, yeah, it's heavy on the pips. Yeah, I'm not gonna like ignore that. It's really heavy on the pips. But the fact is, if we're sitting at max pips, you can do Lord of the Jungle into the primal Oni. That, yeah. Interesting to see, of course, and you can technically combo this with other spells too, but we'll see how that works and what people tend to do with all these strategies. Some of the life spells actually were pretty good in my opinion compared to the other spells that we've been witnessing. Especially the balance ones are really interesting if I say so myself, just because the writing was kind of hieroglyphic X, but yeah, hieroglyphic-esque. So there's that. But you guys let me know your thoughts and opinions on all the shadow changes for life on the enhanced stuff, as well as the transformation, as well as the creature. You guys let me know your thought process, what you guys think. Do you guys like these changes? Do you hate it? Is there something that you want to be changed in a specific path or a tier? Whatnot? Leave all that in the comment section down below, and I kind of give you guys my opinions and thoughts on these spells as a whole. Just remember though, watch the original video that I will have in the description. That is linked to Blaze Life Armor's video where he was given these teasers. I'm just kind of giving you guys my thought process and opinions as a whole. So just remember that. And then be on the lookout for more teasers for the rest of the week. Of course, we do have the other schools that are still remaining. We saw quite a lot. And then of course on Sunday I will tease mine, of course, as well. But that is it for me. Leave a like, subscribe, all type of stuff. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, guys.